You are a Roman legionary. You have marched for 8 hours under a burning sun, carrying almost half your own body weight. Your feet are bleeding, and in a few hours, you may have to stand in a wall of shields and kill men face to face until one side breaks. So what do you put in your body to survive all of this? Not a feast, a handful of grain, a rock-hard biscuit, a sour drink that tastes like vinegar, and, sometimes, something a little stronger to dull the fear. And somehow, on this, these men conquered the known world. Today you will find out exactly what Roman soldiers ate and drank to survive war. What fueled their endless marches, what filled their stomachs before battle, and what they used to push their bodies and their nerves past the limit when the killing started. Let us start with the foundation, because it destroys a myth. Roman soldiers were not meat-hungry carnivores tearing into roasted animals every night like in the movies. The Roman army ran on grain, wheat mostly, and barley. Grain was the fuel of the legions, the base of every meal, the thing a soldier could not live without. Each man received a serious ration, roughly around a kilogram of wheat per day, and from that grain he made almost everything he ate. And they made it themselves. Each little group of 8 men who shared a tent, a contubernium, cooked together. They shared a hand mill to grind grain into flour and shared the cooking. From that wheat, they made 3 main things: porridge, a thick grain mush called pulse that was the everyday food of the army, bread when they had ovens and time, and hardtack, a twice-baked biscuit dried until it was rock solid, hard enough to break your teeth, but which never spoiled and could travel for a very long time. That biscuit was the true survival food, the thing that kept a soldier alive when everything else ran out. Now the drink, and this is where it gets interesting, because the drink was almost a drug in itself. The standard drink of the Roman legionary was pasca, cheap sour wine or wine vinegar, watered down. It tasted rough and acidic, but it was brilliant. Drinking plain water on campaign was dangerous, because river and pond water was often full of bacteria that could destroy an entire army with disease. Pasca, thanks to its acidity and alcohol, was far safer. It killed some of the nasty things in bad water, it hydrated the men, and it did not spoil in the heat. Think about what that means. One of the biggest killers of ancient armies was not the enemy, it was disease. And the Romans, without fully understanding why, had a daily drink that kept their soldiers healthier than the men across the battlefield. A sour cup of vinegar wine may have won as many campaigns as any sword. And pasca did something else too. That splash of alcohol and acid gave a tired soldier a small lift, a mild kick of energy and alertness on a brutal march. It was not just hydration, it was, in a small way, the energy drink of the ancient world. And here is a moment you might recognize. According to the Gospels, when Jesus was on the cross, a soldier offered him a sponge soaked in sour wine. That sour wine was almost certainly pasca, the everyday drink from the soldier's own flask. Now let us get to the part almost nobody talks about. What did soldiers put in their bodies before a battle? Because facing combat in the ancient world was a nightmare of fear. You could smell it, the terror of men about to fight and possibly die horribly. And soldiers across history have always looked for something to take the edge off that fear. The Romans were no different. The most obvious tool was wine. Before a fight, or before doing something terrifying, wine was used to steady the nerves and build courage. A drink to burn away the fear, to make a frightened man brave enough to step forward into the wall of enemy spears. This is sometimes called liquid courage, and it is one of the oldest tricks in the history of warfare. A soldier with a bit of wine in him was a soldier more willing to charge, less able to feel the cold grip of panic. Roman commanders understood the value of a fighting force that was not paralyzed by terror. But be careful, because the Romans were also obsessed with self-control. Discipline was everything to them. A soldier so drunk he could not hold formation was useless, and worse than useless, he was a danger to the men beside him. So it was a fine balance, just enough to steady the hands and quiet the fear, never enough to break the iron discipline that made the legion deadly. That balance, that control, was itself a Roman weapon. And before we go on, because what is coming next is even darker, if you are hooked on how Rome really worked, hit subscribe and drop me a comment. Could you have stood in the front line of a Roman battle? Let us keep going. Now, the world beyond Rome was a different story, and this is where it gets wild. Because while Rome fought sober and disciplined, many of the enemies they faced did the opposite. Some of the tribal warriors Rome fought, especially in the north, worked themselves into a frenzy before battle. There are accounts of warriors who fought in a kind of trance of rage, feeling no pain, no fear, seemingly beyond human limits. Modern historians strongly suspect that some of this was helped along by substances, alcohol in huge quantities, and possibly plants and mushrooms with mind-altering, fear-killing effects. A warrior who has taken something that removes pain and terror becomes a horrifying thing to face on a battlefield. He does not flinch. He does not retreat. He keeps coming even when wounded. Imagine being a disciplined, sober Roman soldier holding your line and watching an enemy charge at you who feels no pain, screaming, wild-eyed, drugged out of his mind, on rage and whatever he swallowed before the fight. That was a real psychological weapon, and Rome had to face it. And the Roman answer was not to match the frenzy, it was discipline. The cold, trained, sober wall of shields that held its ground, while the drugged berserker exhausted himself against it. This was, in a way, a clash of two philosophies: chaos and chemistry on one side, order and control on the other, and over the centuries, order usually won. Let us go deeper on that clash, because it is one of the most fascinating things about Roman warfare. The frenzied, possibly drugged warrior is terrifying for the first few minutes. He hits the line like a storm, fearless and wild. But there is a fatal weakness in fighting that way. A body pushed into a chemical frenzy burns out fast. The rage fades, the substance wears off, the exhaustion crashes down, and suddenly, the unstoppable warrior is a shaking, spent man. The Roman system was built precisely to survive those first terrifying minutes and then win. Hold the line. Stay in formation. Let the frenzy exhaust itself against your shields. And when the enemy is gasping and drained, that is when the disciplined, sober, well-fed Roman pushes forward and finishes it. That is the whole story of Rome against much of the ancient world in miniature. Passion versus patience. The high versus the drill. And again, the calm, fed, sober, organized soldier outlasted the wild one. It is almost a lesson about substances themselves. The short, violent high loses, over time, to steady discipline. Rome did not need to drug its men into monsters. It trained them into machines, and machines do not burn out after 5 minutes. But do not think the Romans were completely clean of all substances, because they were not. Roman military medicine used a whole pharmacy of plant-based drugs, and much of it was about the body of the soldier. The most important was opium, taken from the poppy, which the Romans knew well. Opium was a powerful painkiller, and in a world where a soldier might have an arrow pulled out of his flesh with no real anesthetic, that mattered enormously. A wounded legionary could be given opium to dull agony that would otherwise be unbearable. It let a doctor work, and it let a man survive treatment without dying of shock and pain. There were other plants too. Herbs and roots used to help men sleep, to calm nerves, to fight infection, to ease pain. The line between medicine, drug, and poison in the ancient world was blurry, and army doctors worked with all of it. A substance that healed a soldier in one dose could knock him out in another and kill him in a third. Roman military doctors were, in their way, some of the most experienced pharmacists of the ancient world, precisely because they were constantly patching up broken bodies with whatever plants and mixtures they had. The doctors who traveled with the legions saw more trauma than almost anyone alive, and out of that grim experience, they learned an enormous amount about the human body, knowledge that outlived the empire itself. And here is a dark thought. A soldier given opium for a serious wound day after day while he healed could easily develop a dependence on it without anyone understanding what was happening. The Romans had no concept of addiction as we know it, so a veteran who came back from war, hooked on opium, restless and sick without it, would have had no idea what was wrong with him, and neither would his doctor. The hidden cost of Roman warfare was not only the men who died, it was some of the men who survived, quietly trapped by the very substances that had saved their lives. There is a myth worth killing right here, because people always ask it. Did Roman soldiers eat meat? Yes, but not the way you think. Meat was not the daily main course. It was a supplement, eaten when available rather than the center of every meal, and often it was pork, bacon, and preserved salted meat because those could be carried and stored. Archaeology proves it. When researchers dig up the rubbish pits of Roman forts, they find enormous amounts of animal bone, pork, beef, mutton, chicken. So soldiers ate meat, and more than we used to think. But it sat on top of a foundation of grain. Meat was the topping, wheat was the meal, and there is a story that shows how deep this went. Roman soldiers actually complained when they were given too much meat and not enough grain, free meat, and they protested. To a Roman, grain was proper food, the food of civilized men. Living on meat and milk was, in their eyes, the diet of a barbarian. So every bowl of porridge was a quiet statement of who they were. To eat wheat was to be Roman, and being Roman was the thing they were ultimately fighting for. Let us return to the everyday diet, because staying strong over months of campaign was its own kind of survival. Roman soldiers ate far more than just grain. They ate pork, bacon, and salted preserved meat, easy to carry and store. They ate cheese, packed with energy and protein. They ate lentils, beans, and other legumes for protein that kept for a long time. They ate vegetables whenever they could, because Roman military thinking understood that a healthy soldier was a fighting soldier. They used olive oil for calories, ate plenty of salt to replace what they sweated out, and flavored everything with garum, a powerful fermented fish sauce that turned a boring bowl of porridge into something you could actually stomach day after day. And they foraged and hunted, taking fruit, nuts, wild herbs, and game from the land they marched through. A moving legion was also a moving mouth, eating its way across the landscape. When it passed through fertile land, it took what it needed, sometimes by trade and sometimes by force. There is one more substance detail that fits right here, and it involves the drink again. Some ancient accounts describe wine that was not just wine. Wine could be mixed with herbs, resins, and other additives, and some of those additives had real effects on the body and mind. A cup handed to a soldier before a grim task might have contained more than grape. We cannot always know exactly what went into these mixtures, but the ancient world was full of the knowledge of which plants calmed, which excited, and which numbed. A skilled hand could turn an ordinary drink into something that took the fear away, and an army preparing men for slaughter had every reason to use that knowledge. But once again, Rome kept it on a leash. The genius of the Roman army was never in going furthest into excess. It was in control. Just enough wine to steady a man, just enough opium to save a wounded one, just enough of everything, and never so much that it broke the machine. Where other peoples reached for more frenzy, more intoxication, more chaos, Rome reached for exactly the right amount and not a drop more. That restraint, that refusal to lose control even when facing death, may be the deepest secret of the whole empire. Now here is what truly won wars, and it is almost invisible: logistics. Feeding tens of thousands of men on the move was one of the greatest challenges in the ancient world, and Rome was better at it than anyone. Grain was collected, stored in massive granaries, and moved to the armies, often by ship and river, because water transport was far easier than land. Forts had granaries built to keep grain dry and safe from pests, raised off the ground with clever ventilation. While enemy tribes often fought on empty stomachs, depending on whatever they could grab, the Roman soldier was backed by an entire imperial supply chain, keeping food flowing to him across thousands of miles. Think about that. Rome did not just have better weapons and training, it had better logistics, and logistics win wars. An army that eats reliably beats an army that starves, no matter how brave or how frenzied the starving men are. That steady, boring, reliable ration was a weapon as real as any sword. And it had a psychological effect too. A soldier who knows he will be fed tomorrow fights with a calm that a starving man simply cannot. The dependable Roman ration did not just feed bodies, it fed courage. And do not forget what the man carried on his own back. A Roman legionary was nicknamed one of Marius's mules, loaded with armor, weapons, digging tools, camp stakes, cooking pot, and several days of food rations. He carried his own grain, his own biscuit, his own mess kit, and every single night, no matter how exhausted, the army built a fortified camp from scratch, with ditches and walls in an organized grid, and then, inside it, the men ground their grain and cooked their porridge. Marchers, builders, cooks, and killers, all in one man. So let us pull it together. What did the Roman soldier put in his body to survive war? Grain above all, as porridge, bread, and iron-hard biscuit. Pasca, the sour vinegar wine that kept him healthy and gave him a small lift. Wine before battle to steady his nerves, carefully controlled so it never broke his discipline. Opium and plant medicines to survive terrible wounds, sometimes at the hidden cost of dependence. Pork, cheese, beans, vegetables, and pungent fish sauce to stay strong over months. And behind all of it, the greatest supply system the ancient world had ever seen. It was not glamorous. There were no feasts on the march, no drugged frenzy before the charge. It was simple, practical, disciplined, and relentlessly effective. And that is exactly the point. Rome did not conquer the world on luxury or on chemical madness. It conquered it on discipline, on organization, and on a boring bowl of wheat porridge and a sober wall of shields night after night at the edge of the known world. So the next time you picture the glory of Rome, the eagles, the armor, the endless victories, remember what actually powered it. Not gold, not a battle frenzy. Wheat, sour wine, and iron discipline. A tired man grinding grain in the dark, drinking vinegar, steadying his nerves, and getting up the next morning to march again and conquer another piece of the world. The empire was not built on feasts or on frenzy. It was built on porridge and control. And that might be the most Roman thing of all.